Hello, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube, and welcome to another episode of Fanalysis, Avatar: The Last Airbender. I'm Reti4, with me today, Grado91,
Oh, hey guys.
and Antoine Bandelay.
Be water, my friends.
So taking us away with the summary of this episode introduction, Matt.
Right. So today we're covering book one, episode five, which is called The King of Omashu. Omashu is the name of this city where the gang finds themselves engaging in all kinds of random hijinks along their way to the North Pole. This is another of Aang's detours to a place he once knew before he was the boy on the iceberg. So taking us away with our first talking point, Antoine.
So yeah, as Matt said, like the opening is like Omashu, which we get a little tidbit from Katara and Sokka that they've never been to like a big city before, which you're kind of reminded that they've only been on that small village in the south for their entire lives. So seeing big things like this kind of like amaze them. But yeah, like I actually like Aang always suspects to find his friends, even though they should be hundreds in their hundreds by now or beyond that. So it makes me think also just from like in world perspective, like do people just live naturally that long? Because Boomy, who we know is 112 years old, when we see him, he's pretty like fit.
Spry.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's ever touched upon like officially within the context of the show, but like
There's,
people are kind of old.
there's precedent
There's
for it based on how many people we do see
Yeah.
that are ancient, even people who
Yeah.
have been living in really bad conditions. So, I mean, there's no reason not to believe it.
Yeah, we don't have any like statistical breakdown or like why this happens or like how common it is, but there's enough like for you to know that it's certainly not unique. I mean, Avatar
Right. They're not
Kyoshi
really
like
human.
was said to they don't say this for some time, but Avatar Kyoshi, one of Aang's past lives, was something like 230 or something like that when she died. Which is like crazy old, that's like fantasy old, but like so it happens. But there's lots of badass old folks in this show. So,
Yeah.
there's that.
Which makes they haven't covered it yet. I mean, this is really talking in the future, but like eventually Aang does pass, and he passed relatively young
Young, yeah.
for these characters in this world. It seems like they grow like kind of like elves. They kind of grow to like adulthood like relatively quickly, and then they kind of like stay adults for like a long time
Yeah.
before they're like old, and then they
Extended
get decrepit old.
primes.
Right, exactly. It's kind of like Harry Potter. I feel like in the same sense that like you don't really know how old I think most of the Harry Potter characters are, but like they're all older than regular humans. Like they live longer because they're
A lot of
magical.
them, yeah, a lot of them are.
It's also worth
Yeah.
noting as well that the Harry Potter timeline takes place about 10 years earlier than most people think it does. One of the things I always noticed in the films is they show the Millennium Bridge getting destroyed, and it's like that wasn't built when
Right,
this
didn't
happened.
exist in the
So it's like
in the
it's in the
90s.
90s, yeah, late 80s, early 90s is the predominant timeline.
Yeah,
So,
I think if you're talking about like the films, you have to make a lot of allowances for those in particular. Like the books are like slightly another story maybe.
Yeah.
But what were we talking about? Like old people in Avatar,
Yeah, old
right?
people in Avatar, yeah.
yeah, but there's a precedent for it
Um,
basically. We do see it a lot. It's not like this is a standout case. So it's worth acknowledging that maybe they do just live a bit longer, especially in the cases of the Avatar, who live for a very long time.
Speaking of old people,
Yes.
hey, it needs a disguise.
Yeah, it's the first time we have the. Is it the first time? One of the earliest times that they introduced where they need to keep the Aang being the Avatar a secret. Probably on the coattails of the whole Kyoshi incident.
Yeah, because,
Yeah, the more people know, the more the news will spread, and the more trouble they'll attract to the location. So this is the first time we see him kind of donning the full disguise, Appa style.
Does he ever do
yeah.
this again? Like I feel like this is like pretty much like it never goes
Don't
this
know. Fire Nation obviously he
on the
starts
nose,
covering
you
it
know.
up, but this is definitely one of the on the nose moments.
And
It's worth noting as
can
well.
either of you
Sorry, what?
can either of you two like pronounce the name he gave himself? Like
Pakal-
Papa Dappa Ding Dong or like whatever.
Papalopinopoulos or something like that.
They say it like 3 times
Yeah,
in this episode.
becomes a running joke. There are a few running gags in this episode actually that I found really enjoyable. But the actual quality of the episode's animation and voice acting, I think it's worth noting at least early on in the episode. This seems like it was, like you said, mentioned in one of the other episodes, Matt. Seems like this maybe one of the ones that was done earlier in production. Because the overall
I
quality is not
agree
up
with
to
that.
par of what we've
Yeah.
seen thus far. Not that it's bad, but
Yeah.
there is a significant
It's
drop.
again, I don't know the the technical term for this, like shading, lighting, whatever you would say, like in terms of. But there's something the animation does appear more 2D than like it does later on. Like there's just less dimension to it. But you touched on the voice acting. I think it's really good. Like even early on here, like especially remembering that the principal cast are fairly close to their characters' ages. So the kid playing Aang is basically Aang's age, and like he does like a good job of like trying to sound like an old person. Like even though you could tell it's a kid doing the work, it's genuinely amusing. And most times when like a kid's job is to be funny, it just falls on its face. Like it's just bad. So I really appreciate that quality there. But I don't know if it's just good direction or talent or both, probably both. But it's I'm grateful for it, I guess I should say.
Yeah, they've got a good
I think
range.
Cabbage Guy too.
Yes, the introduction of my cabbages. Yeah, which runs I think 3 times throughout this episode.
Yeah, which they bring back, which is awesome that they do that.
Yeah,
it's
one of
funny
the running gags
because
of the series. Gags, not gags.
most of the time, like I feel like at least in like modern day stuff, when stuff becomes like a running gag, it does so almost because of like fan response. And like this guy, like he was always like their running gag, just something that the people behind the scenes clearly thought was funny because he was already a running gag before they had any fan base.
Yeah,
you know, this
reception
being the first
to read
season.
from.
Yeah. So it's funny.
Yeah,
but
And I like the note that Reddy just put here about how different Omashu is now versus what it was when Aang knew it, when it was all about like, farts and giggles and stuff like that. And now it's like more of like not so much oppressed, but they're more
abrasive,
cautious about who they're letting into their city, which is why we have the cabbage guy scene in the first place, because they're like, we don't actually. Why does he not want to? I felt like he's just being mean.
Rotten cabbages. It's like, you think Omashu wants rotten cabbages? We're a great city. Shove off.
I
and
thought
then
it was like
destroys them.
smuggling something or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it gets a little confusing later on because he has a stand inside the city. So so who knows what that guy, the guy that took his job very seriously, that man.
Yeah.
But
that guard.
It's a case of the city seeming to be very much on guard and on the defensive. It's the era has changed and Omashu has changed with it. It's trying to protect its borders.
Because they are so close to the Fire Nation as well. Like, Basti Saint doesn't really have that issue, and not even like the northern village, the Northern Water Tribe, because they're so far from it. But like that west coast, that's all where all the Fire Nation colonies are. So
yeah, Ba Sing Se is like impenetrable anyway. They've been trying for like 100 years and they just can't get in there. But Northern Water Tribe definitely benefits from being so isolated up there. Yeah. Oh my God! I didn't even know I said that. I should have just played it off.
You should have just played it cool.
No,
I
apologize.
Anyway, basically the unfriendly gates open up, don't they? Showing us a bit of the earthbending engineering as well. Which I like. This is one of the things about Omashu, how it frames the way not earthbending, but bending in general is applied to society. We've seen the steamships of the Fire Nation. We've seen now these giant bulking gates that just get literally pulled open by a retinue of earthbenders on the walls. See it again later on in Ba Sing Se, but I love how they've incorporated it into the like structural and architectural designs of all the different settlements and cultures. It's really, really cool to see.
Yeah, it's not just combat. They actually use it for their everyday.
Yeah, because why wouldn't they? If you can pull open a massive stone gate, why wouldn't you use that as to make a massive stone gate? Especially when your enemies can't do the same. It's an invaluable asset.
I think that's part of what people gravitate toward this series, even if only on like a subconscious level. Like what makes it seem more like it's legitimately its own fantasy setting and not just like a riff on something else you've seen, is because of how intricately they've tied in the bending to just the way they live their lives in this world. I mean, it's like you said, like, why wouldn't you? It's just like what we do with like technology. Like, why wouldn't you use it for this or that in your everyday? Like, you wouldn't just use it for war or self-defense or whatever. You're going to make your life easier however you can. Yeah. It's just utility.
Especially the earthbenders, which we've seen are so pragmatic and versatile in their uses. They're not the type that is going to make this all into this mystic art. It's just, earthbending. It's part of who they are. And their culture reflects that, which is really interesting to see. It's the first time we see it with Omashu, I think, certainly on a large scale. And it is a large scale because as they walk through the gates, we get the introduction to the whole kind of sloping shot leading up into the city with the chutes, the delivery chutes, and the
Mm-hmm.
huge towering walls. It's
I guess
certainly a departure from what we've seen before.
it's the first time that you say that it's the first time that we've seen like a culture that is like up and running, like really, like I mean, in this series, other than like just like I don't want to call it like a podunk, but just the small village of like the Kyoshi is
Mm-hmm.
not really like a sprawling city or metropolis. Aang's air temple was deserted, and we all saw what the Southern Water Tribe was about. So this is the first time you see like the hustle and bustle of like a big Earth Kingdom
Of like
or any kingdom,
civilization,
city.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That might be why it's more striking here. It's also the first episode without Zuko in it. Now that I think
Mhm.
about that.
Yeah. And you almost don't feel his absence. That's one of the strengths of the show, how it can force you to focus on what's happening in the contents of the episode, making it very self-contained without being like, oh, what's this happening? Where is the overall plot? Why is this that? It keeps you focused on what's happening, even when it's something as relatively mundane as this episode, because it isn't exactly a standout in the series, but it's not boring or pointless. There's they put a purpose on almost every episode that we see. We'll be getting into what episode purpose this has, but it's good to see in the show.
Yeah, it could have easily just been like filler, but it actually like serves a character moment that needs to happen for Aang to eventually, do what he needs to do at the end of the series.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that part actually.
Which actually I want to talk, which I do want to talk about at the end, because he did the Earth King Boomy says something that I'm like, I don't know if that really was applied, but we'll get to that when he talks about that in the fight scene. So after they do the shoots, it was like comedic shooty time, like, oh, we're having fun. You're like, it's like that very, I think, more typical Nickelodeon type of comedy type of like pacing, or just like goofing around, like hitting stuff and almost getting killed by spears, which is like, dang, like that's really dangerous. He literally almost got like Sokka almost got impaled.
I love his look as well. He looks back and goes, sharp spears. And yeah, at least the humor works in the scene. It is a lot more cliche than what we get in general for this show, but it is entertaining at least.
It's entertaining and it's well animated. Like we talked about the quality of the animation not being like top notch compared to what comes later, but I think it all just comes down to budget. Like it's an ambitious project, just not the most as refined as they could have made it.
Yeah.
But it's still good. But like you were saying, like what they're actually doing, like that would it is like typical Nickelodeon stuff, but it makes sense all because of Aang being as old as he is, or as young as he is, I guess I should say. Because what he's really doing is like super like annoying and obnoxious. Like you're tearing up the city for like no reason, just because you're 12.
It's vandalism.
Like so yeah. yeah.
I mean, that guy had been working on that pot for hours, and it's just sorry.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does kind of highlight the childish aspect of Aang, and the fact that the other two are willing to go along with it on occasion, even if they do sometimes put their foot down.
Because they're kids too.
Yeah, it's always important to keep that in mind when you're watching the show, and it does again. It excuses some of the light fun they get into, but also this parallels well with what the flashback that came before it just was with Boomy, because that was an introduction to the kid Boomy that Aang knew, and the reason, perhaps a large reason anyway, for why he's here. He's trying to relive some of the moments in his past, and he's a bit of a crazy one, Boomy, but we'll get to that in the next scene.
Yeah,
like
he literally is mad.
Yeah,
that heavily medicated child he went to school with, or yeah. But I like that that as short as that scene is, you can see that as happy-go-lucky as Aang is normally, like Boomy makes him look very subdued.
Oh yeah.
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 It's like it's well presented in that way.
Yeah. You've got to wonder how he managed to make his way up.
But yeah, they eventually crash into Cabbage Man again, who's mad and wants them like, oh yeah, he's like, I want a head for every head of this to be destroyed. Whatever.
Yeah, it's actually the most he's involved in the actual plot, I believe. This episode.
Yeah, personally, yeah.
Yeah, but
which I can see why. I mean, like I want to say that in Skyrim I get like 2 gold apiece for a head of cabbage. So I mean, I can see why he's pissed off.
Yeah. But yeah, but
the
basically
first
we
thing
get
he's in is
introduced.
more like the Emperor's New Groove, where it's like don't mess with the Emperor's groove, the groove like scene
Yeah,
in that
thrown out the
movie, and
window.
then like the next one is actually like a scene.
Yeah. But we get introduced to Boomy, or rather the Earth King, because at this point we don't know that he's Boomy.
We don't know he's
Did anyone else not immediately guess, or did anyone else fail to immediately guess that it was Boomy?
I don't
was
think I
too,
remember the first time I watched it.
I
It was too
was
long ago.
I was too old not to have known that that's who it was.
Yeah.
Like, just in terms of the way your brain works when you're seen enough stories or whatever. Like, I'm sure I knew, but it's fine because it's not really the point of the episode, I guess. I don't know what the point of the episode is. We'll get to that later. But anyway, uh, yeah, like there wasn't that much mystique, like in terms of that for me.
Kind of works though
But,
for Boomy's whole shtick. He's not about subtlety and mystique, is he? It's he's if for the kids young enough to have it fall for them, this might be the first time where this kind of thing happens. This is everyone has a first story where a reveal will get them. But for those old enough, it was very obvious.
And it doesn't get into it, but like there's enough going on in terms of the way they characterize Booby, like both young and old, for me to go, I'm not even sure that Aang even knew he was a prince or whatever. Like, because he's like, I think they call him like, sire or whatever. Like, so he's clearly like a king and not like the mayor of the town or whatever. He's a royal. But his whole shtick, like even in the flashback, was wanting Aang to pay attention to like the not so obvious thing or opening your mind. So he might not have introduced himself as I'm the Prince of Omashu. Like, let's be friends. It might have just been like I'm a kid, just so you can get to know the real me or whatever. So I like all that, but there's enough going on for me to buy the fact that Aang doesn't make the obvious connection that he's his old friend.
Oh yeah,
when he sees him.
definitely no question of why Aang wouldn't realize. I didn't mean to criticize it on that level. It just meant
Oh,
it was a bit
no,
obvious.
I know you didn't.
To be honest, I wasn't really criticizing at all because it's just one of those things that you pick up, isn't it? It doesn't matter how subtle it is. It's going to be obvious for character design, if nothing else.
I was just explaining why, even though it doesn't surprise me, like it doesn't frustrate me that like Aang doesn't key into what's going on immediately.
They play it in quite well. I enjoy the humor in the scene as well. Following the verdict scene when they throw a feast, there's a lot of puns in this episode that I just enjoy, despite the fact that they're obvious and painful, or should be. Lettuce leaf is funny to this day for me.
You can't hold his hair. You have to let us leave. Lettuce leaf.
It's so awkward and weird. I like the musical cue they gave him, like that circus, like sort of. It's just so odd. It doesn't jive with anything else you see in this series. It's just like every time he's about to say something, they start playing this weird musical beat that works well for his brand of crazy.
The episode's really good for musical cues in general. Actually, during the shoot slide we saw before, there were a lot of moments where it would just pause, or it would slam on a screenshot, and then there'd be a little bit of a musical key in the background that would just change, and then it would go straight back to what it was before. And it really played. They had a lot of fun with the sound design on this episode. As well, in the pun moment is when the guy in the background goes. Between every single one of the awkward moments in the episode. It happens three times, and it's brilliant. I love that. It's just little details that make the scene so much more fulfilling. But yeah,
we were speaking before about him being king, even though there's Omashu, and I think we said that off.
Yeah, it was off. It was off.
That was before we started. Yeah, there's some confusion in terms of like the
how many kings,
hierarchy.
What kind of king?
With Barson, is it part of the same territory? Is it a completely separate kingdom by itself? Even though there is only one Earth kingdom by description, we don't know. Maybe Omashu isn't part of the Earth kingdom. We don't really know. I don't think it's ever actually mentioned as part of the Earth kingdom actually. So that may just be the reason.
Aang literally says, "Behold, like the Earth Kingdom city of Omashu." But
okay, my bad then.
but then again, it's confusing because Boomy calls it his kingdom, and I feel like they obviously didn't have the Earth King and that whole plot in mind when they wrote this. But whatever. It's not really even a flaw. It's just this question.
Yeah, question
that nerds like us get invested in. What's going on here? We need an answer.
Yeah. It may have just been an oversight and they didn't think about it, but who knows? You can have kings within one nation as well, so it's technically possible.
Sure. Yeah. But everything, most things in this series are a little bit more simplistic in terms of it's just what it is. So it seems like there needs to be a compendium somewhere where they explain.
We'll have to have our own headcanons for it. Let us know what you think in the comment section below, guys.
Everyone's got deep thoughts on this.
I can't believe you didn't realize the obvious. But yeah, he
I
brings
like
one
that
to
he
the.
presents the
sorry,
challenge. Yeah, the challenges and everything is that he gives them the crystal ring that like keeps growing, which helps I think as a ongoing conflict for why Aang should be doing what he's doing, because otherwise you're just it's kind of like let's just
Exactly.
get you know.
Yeah.
Like,
But he can't earthbend,
Yeah.
so he can't stop the crystals. You know, he has to stick them out. It's just,
Yeah.
and I like the idea as well. It's something. It's quite unique, even in the Avatar universe. That little crystal, creeping crystal thing. It's like it doesn't really show up again. It has no real. There's nothing that's similar to it. It's really cool. I like the idea.
It's something out of a video, like here's the reason why you need to pass this level, or like
Yeah.
like instead of just literally, like you said, just walking away, like whatever, I can literally just fly out of here on my bison. But no, like even if you took your friends, they're stuck in this, growing prison on their hand. So it's cool.
It's a cool little moment. I like the tests as well. They're very simplistic, but I feel like they match Boomy, who commits to the role of a mad villain for this part of the episode. when Aang begins climbing the ladder in the first test, it's just shouting out, "Oh, sure, climb the ladder. No one's ever thought of that before." Like little things like that, jabs that he throws his way, I enjoyed. And the fact that the tests are teaching him to look at a problem a different way than he would otherwise, it matches the end of the episode or the end of the riddle section for the story. You've got floppy.
Are we talking about each test individually, or was that it? Like, sorry, I didn't mean to derail you.
The
That's
ladder
right.
thing. I mean, they're all like just unexpected. Like a ladder, like don't try and go up the freaking powerful waterfall.
Yeah, that's where I'm getting at though, is because the last test is kind of like, so consider everything that I just told you, right? Like think outside the box. And then it's like the third test is like when he does that, it's like, oh, you made the wrong choice.
Yeah.
Like I mean, I just it's not like a huge problem, but it is like, what is your point, Boomy? Exactly. But might be even a mystery to himself. I guess just
at the
keeping
same
it in
time as
mind.
Boomy.
Yeah.
It's like, wait, what was my point?
Yeah, because the first test is all, well, you can't climb up the ladder because of this obstacle in your way. The next one is, oh, my pet is not that cute little thing, right?
It's the big monster.
And then test
And
number
I'm not
three
a fellow
Yeah.
man. I'm actually pretty built.
Yeah, you got to fight either the two badasses or the sad old man. Oh, psych, I'm not a sad old man. I mean, it's like, okay, like, like it's like he finally was thinking the way he wanted to think, and then wrong choice. It's like, wait a minute. Let me hit the rewind button here. Like,
Yeah.
what?
What was the message?
No.
Look beneath the underneath. Naruto
Whatever.
style. But yeah,
But we can get into the actual confrontation now if you want, though.
Yeah, the confrontation between Boomy and Aang, the actual duel itself, I found really interesting because it's the first time we've seen earthbending on a large scale, and it's also the last time we see it of this style because Boomy has a very distinct. Well, all of the earthbenders of great power that we see have a very distinct kind of personalized style. Almost the other bending techniques don't. Like, there's a lot of through lines in terms of the way people apply their techniques for the rest of the bending techniques styles.
Yeah.
But his isn't.
I think because of how what's the word? Abundant the source of earth is, like you can either use it to either primarily defensively to strike at your opponent or to change the dueling ground, and that's what he does chiefly. Like that's like he does that more often than most of them do. Like a lot of what he did is more in like environmental manipulation than outright assaults on Aang's person.
Even the movements of
Yep.
his actual strikes themselves, he's doing the holding the hands to his waist and doing the sort of step stomp thing that he does is kind of unique in the application.
That, yeah, like I'm sure we must have touched on this at least before, but like they have like a martial arts expert helping them animate all this, and like I've seen him doing like that exact thing in behind the scenes posturing, like for them to take cues from in their animation. But yeah, like I guess like that's an actual like Hungar stance or whatever the term is. But yeah.
It's
I also found it interesting that it seems like earthbenders are pretty have a lot of self-confidence because he like proclaims himself as like the best earthbender.
Yeah.
And someone else who's
How
done the
many of
same
those
thing,
are there?
and it's like, yeah, like, and even like just even if we look at some of the stuff in book 2 where like the that wrestling like underground thing. Like every like Earthbenders are like super confident in like themselves and like their ability to be awesome.
Yeah, and
Why,
we
well,
find
why
out
wouldn't you
that's
be? I
well,
mean,
yeah,
otherwise you don't have the mindset to move the rocks, right? Like that's
precisely.
what
We find
you
out that
True.
learn
later
from
with
it.
Toph, like
Yeah,
how you have to be
yeah.
unyielding, unbreakable. So that
But
kind of lends
also,
itself to
like
it.
in fairness to him though, like short of Toph, who nobody knows about, he probably is.
Mm.
Like at this point, anyway. You know.
Yeah,
Um,
I'd agree with that.
yeah. So I'll give him that.
Yeah, I'd especially what we see later, with his overall, uh,
His White
uh
Lotus
yeah,
like membership status.
yeah, that's
Like
that's
Mhm.
that's a big thing. But just the sheer scale of what he's capable of. Yeah, I'd say he's earned the title. With the acknowledging of the ignorance of Toth, who we'll get to later. But yeah, so the actual duel itself on Aang's part as well. I loved the scale of the tornado he builds he creates to deflect the large boulder, which is the largest display of earthbending power we've seen thus far. That huge column getting thrown at him, it just gets span around the tornado and flung straight back. It's one of the few times we see Aang airbend on that level without being in the Avatar state.
yeah,
It was cool. Nice little
he
display.
does. He does a maneuver like that twice in this fight, where he basically just returns like a giant rock back to its source. Um, it's kind of weird. Like, can you hear me?
Yep. Can you
Oh,
hear?
you can hear me, yeah.
Okay. Like, all right. Anyway, and I liked that, like in a normal or in any other show, like that would be like the villain like accidentally took himself out, but
Mm.
like Boomy was able
Mhm.
to like adapt to both of those. Like I really enjoyed that. I also think I feel like pointing this out. Don't be mad at me, Earthbender fans, like in the comments. It's like to me like the least appealing style to look at, just visually. Um, and it's not so here. Like rewatching it, this is really entertaining to me because of how um I don't know, there's just a certain like dynamic quality to the way Boomy's doing
Like
what he's
there's one
doing.
point where he like turns the ground to mud, and just stops Angus in
Yeah.
track. Like that
Yeah,
kind of thing is
that kind of
really
stuff.
cool.
Yeah, most of the time they're just throwing rocks at each other, like to be honest.
Right.
And a lot of times it's even cool when they're doing that. But you want to vary it up. Like you want to just switch it up sometimes, and there's lots of variance in what he's doing. He even like burrows underground and like pops up somewhere else. Like you never see that done like in this show, like hardly ever. It's just really cool. Like this is like a cool Earthbender.
Yeah.
I haven't seen this episode in forever, and I really enjoyed rewatching it chiefly for this reason. I wish they would have done more of this looking back, but then it makes sense in the context of him being as skilled as he is. So whatever.
Mm. Definitely the strength of an Earthbender being in their versatility. I think the other bending techniques are more restricted just from the nature of their own element. Like you said, the Earth is abundant, and you can do a lot with it. But I like what Boomy does with it. And like you said,
I
Aang,
mean,
the big thing for me as well, I picked up on the same thing. If this was any other show, he would have been taken out then. But he wasn't. He was just knocked back a bit, and that was enough to pass the test. It was really cool. And he didn't even lose, because you see he looks up, and there's a giant rock floating above them.
Yeah, because
So,
he could easily just push himself into the earth and just let Aang get smashed.
yeah. It acknowledges the fact that, yes, this is a master. Yes, Aang is 12. He's not expected to win. He's expected to hold his own. It part of the lesson, part of the believability of the show.
I also
Sometimes
like
you'll have that happen, is that you'll have like the student get like a lucky like win to be like, oh yeah, you're like doing better, but like it's good they had that. It's like, no, you still would have lost, but good job.
Yeah,
yeah.
precisely. I
I
hate it
also
when the student beats the master without a good reason.
Yeah.
right, yeah. I like that he forced Aang to actually retaliate, like the first, like the things I like about it are chiefly about like just how it informs Boomy's character, because he makes remarks like, oh, what you're doing is like a typical airbender tactic. It implies like he's sparred with them before. It's like how many people actually have that kind of experience like 100 years later? It's like not that many. So it's cool in that regard, and really that's his only discernible lesson in terms of the actual fight, in terms of making him actually like forcing him to take some sort of initiative other than just going on the defense, which Aang eventually does do. But that's pretty much all I had to say there. But my favorite thing was just that the implication he'd fought them before, airbenders.
Yeah, and then he also was trying to teach Aang how to be more like out of the box with the way he's fighting. Like, don't just like fall back on just your pure simple tactics of airbending, which I don't really even like in the final book when he fights Ozai. I don't feel like that's what actually like helps him defeat Ozai. Like I feel like it was something else with the whole hurting himself and nearly dying
Yeah,
and Avatar Ex Machina and stuff. But I mean,
yeah,
like, I
yeah.
would have been cool if or even if there was an attempt, even before that point, like, sure, still have Aang be defeated. But before that point, you see him trying to apply like those sorts of lessons, but just simply failing because like Ozai is just like that good. But you don't even see him doing that so much. I don't feel like doing
No,
like
I would
not.
agree.
Boomy
I'd
like
agree.
stuff.
I think we should save our thoughts to the finale on that one though, because that's
Right,
a
of
long
course.
way off.
I'm
But
saying
I
like
agree
this
with you
is
in
something
principle though.
that does
Yeah,
apply
it should
there
carry
because
on.
it's
You,
yeah.
you're definitely right
I
because I
agree with.
forgot most of the lessons in this episode that should have been
Yeah,
resurgent
yeah,
there.
like carried over.
Yeah,
Maybe because it was a little bit too early too, because you would suspect maybe Boomy being like, one of Aang's masters, which I think is something he wants to happen, but then he's like in prison and by the
yeah.
Fire Nation. He doesn't want to move because
It's a
he's like,
weird mentality
it'll
on that
just
one.
cause more trouble and it's not the right time.
Yeah.
Yeah, Boomy shows up like once per season, so we'll get into the other stuff that he has
Yeah.
to say. Yeah, like later on.
But yeah, so that sums up basically the fight itself. But then obviously we have the riddle at the end where we have another one of those puns on the back of Sokka's failure. Not a pun, but comedic moment. Leading on to the proper reunion between Boomy and Aang, because all of this time we've been discussing it as though he's been framed as Boomy, but up to this point he's just been the king of Omashu. And I like the moment where it's revealed and how it's not that they play the moment not as this big reveal, but as the moment where Aang realizes and is like, "Oh, Boomy, you're a mad genius," and it goes straight into the whole, their relationship side of things, rather than, "Oh, wow, that's you're so clever," or isn't this a great reveal? It doesn't settle on the reveal itself. It focuses on the emotion of the moment, and it's the right
Yeah,
choice.
yeah. The only thing that like took me a little bit out of it, it's not like a problem. It's just like something going in the back of my mind. Even though I've just been like alongside you guys rewatching this show, I can't remember. Has anybody told Aang like what he needs to be doing like in the modern day? Like here's what your goal. Like I know that like Katara has her
Not
opening
yet.
spiel, so it's like it's the first time that like that's like that topic is broached. Like you need to restore balance by confronting Fire Lord Ozai, and I'm going, did this
Right.
dude just like watch the intro or like what's it like? How does he know all this or like what's going on here? So it's a little weird because really all they're doing is trying to get up to the North Pole, right? Like they're not really
Yeah,
like
master
set
the
out
elements
like
is
on
the
a mission
primary
to
goal at the
stop it.
moment.
Yeah,
I'm
but
not even sure where that turn happens for Aang, where he's like, "Oh, I gotta
I
defeat."
know it for sure. Like when he makes contact with like his past life, Roku.
But that's
But
not till book two,
yeah,
isn't
it's
it?
like
Yeah.
halfway. No, it's like
It is
halfway
book
through
one still,
this.
but
It's book one, but it's
Oh, it's
halfway
still
through
book one.
this
Yeah.
season. Yeah.
but
Oh
I
no,
think he's got the
no,
goal in the
Roku
back
just
of his
tells about the
mind.
Avatar state, I
I'm,
think, in book two,
I'm pretty
or
sure.
the
Avatar
danger.
State. Yeah, Avatar State's explained in book two. The actual job, like by summer's
Right,
end, you must have accomplished A, B, C, and D. Like
right.
that's book one, but but it's like pretty late in the game, like for it to show up. But yeah, I was thinking, man, like King Boomy's like got it all mapped out, huh? Like he just knows what needs to be done.
Well, I mean, the balance, the ultimate job of the Avatar is to balance the world, and the Fire Nation
Yeah,
are definitely the
but
ones thrown out at the moment.
yeah, but it's
So,
just like like it's like he's literally he just took all Qatar's notes from the crawl, like like okay, you got to master the elements, and you got to stop Ozai, and you got to restore balance, and you're the only one who can do it, and you're 12, and it's like, or whatever. It's like, wait a minute, what's going on here?
it's Katara. That's what she says before bed every night, Arya style. It's just she spouts off that intro. So Aang's heard it and is like sitting over on the bedroll, awkwardly listening.
And the only reason I bring it up is because he says that because they were like, well, what was the point of all this? And he's like, well, one, I just like to mess with you, and
It's pretty
number
fun.
two, yeah, number two, and slightly less important, I'm going to tell you just your job basically. But it wasn't like later on, and we'll get to it later on, like in his second appearance, he has like a point to make and he demonstrates it through his actions. He didn't really need to do all this just to say what he said to Aang. Like he could have said that just the same way Katara tells the audience. It's just a little weird to me, but whatever.
Yeah.
I get it, like with him trying to teach him to think outside the box, but he didn't verbalize that. Like in the end, he wasn't like, I just wanted to teach you how to think outside of your comfort zone. He's just like, here's why I did it. Cue intro.
And yeah, then the episode does wrap up with the two of them going down the chutes, going back to the intro of the episode. The whole point of the episode was that wanting to ride the chutes in memory of, or perhaps Aang thought he would be alive with Bumi on their way on the great journey to the North Pole. I like how the episode wraps up with that as well. It's one of the episodes where they don't just fly off into the sun. Not that I have a problem with that. I love those endings, but it is a nice break from the norm of them flying off on Appa into the sunset. It does just fade to white and cut the episode at that point, which is the right time to do it, I think. But yeah,
that's it.
Yeah, that's the episode. The King of Omashu.
Yeah, for an episode with no Zuko, pretty decent.
Yeah. No overall connection to the plot, really. You could skip this one and not have missed anything outside of the fact that Bumi's been introduced as a character that will return. But at the same time, as we said before, it's it has an emotional purpose. You get to meet one of Aang's past connections, someone who helped shape who he is. I think quite visibly shape who he is, because you can imagine Bumi, a lot of his traits being rubbed off on Aang, having grown up in the monk temple. Stops off at Omashu, having left the temple, and immediately runs into someone like Bumi. That's going to have an impact on your character. So it's nice to have that shown here.
Yeah, for sure. I agree on that.
I enjoyed the episode more than I thought I would on rewatch.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like one of the ones I could have bordered on the filler, well, the negative kind of filler, but it's actually like it does something for the characters so that you can actually have something going forward with it.
And the bending as well. I think the bending was a big deal. Introducing you to the
awesome
culture of
earthbending.
earthbending and the awesome earthbending styles, which we've covered quite extensively. So yeah, that's about the episode wrapped up. Yeah, guys, any closing thoughts, or are we wrapping?
I think we've said it.
Okay. I'm ready for. I still didn't have an outro.
Well, whatever. Me too. Great Jedi.
That's
Bye, guys.
your outro. Hey guys, Antoine, be water.
And goodbye.